Christmas Eve had fallen on the Grand Salon like a rain of gold and crystal. The most exclusive restaurant in the city shone that night with an almost unreal elegance. Tiny lights that flickered like trapped stars, tablecloths of infinite white linen, glasses that sang when rubbed, the aroma of turkey with truffle, oatmeal that was worth more than a car, and marzipan sweets that floated in the air like a promise of expensive happiness. The tables were full of contented laughs, of powerful families, of couples who offered to look into each other's eyes, and of men in suits who closed the year with checks that were dizzying. Everything was perfect. Everything, except one thing. At the most privileged table in the restaurant, the one that looked directly at the snowy city through the huge window, there was a single woman, Doña Elena, 70 years old, owner of half the city's skyline, a real estate empire that was measured in endless zeros. And yet, that night, in front of her, there was only a piece of dark, rustic, humble bread that she broke with slow, trembling fingers. The waiters surrounded her like well-trained ghosts, with respect, with distance, with a pity that they did not dare to name. They knew that she could buy the entire restaurant with a single move of her black card. And they also knew that no card in the world could fill the empty chair in front of her. Elena chewed without desire, with her gaze lost in the reflection of the Christmas lights on the glass. For her, Christmas was no longer a party. It was a wound that returned every December to open exactly in the same place. She had only ordered bread and water, nothing from the 10-course menu, no caviar, no lobster, as if she wanted to punish herself, or as if, in the midst of so much false luxury, she desperately sought something true, something that she could touch and feel, that was still real. Her loneliness was so heavy that it seemed to occupy more space than the entire table. Nobody approached, nobody dared, and then the main door turned. A burst of cold air entered, and with it, two figures that did not belong to that world of glass and gold. Mateo, 40 years old, hands marked by wrenches and motor grease, eyelashes that spoke of double shifts and sleepless nights. In his arms he carried Sofía, his little 4-year-old, clinging to him as if he were the center of the universe. Mateo was not rich. Mateo was a mechanic who had saved every extra coin for 6 months to be able to pay for a single dinner at the Grand Salon. He did not do it out of whim. He did it because he had promised his wife before the cancer took her that Sofía, even if it were only once in her life, would have a princess Christmas. As he crossed the threshold, he felt all the looks stick to him. The chandeliers seemed to judge him, the expensive suits too, but he pressed Sofía harder against his chest and raised his head. The head waiter, a tall man with a hawk's nose and a plastic smile, approached slowly. "Reservation, sir?" he asked with that tone that already anticipates the no. Mateo took a wrinkled piece of paper out of the pocket of his worn jacket. Yes, on behalf of Mateo and Sofía, reserved in July. The waiter checked the list reluctantly, found the name, and let out an almost theatrical sigh. Perfect. Follow me. We have a table in the back, near the kitchen. Mateo did not argue. For him, being in there was already winning. As they walked among the tables, Sofía opened her eyes like saucers. Everything was magical for her. The giant ornaments hanging from the ceiling, the violins that sounded soft, the shiny dresses, the men who looked like princes. For a 4-year-old girl, that was not a restaurant. It was a palace taken from a fairy tale. And then, just on the way to her table, her brown eyes met the lonely figure of Doña Elena. The adults saw an eccentric and distinguished lady, eating bread as if it were a kind of rare protest. But Sofía did not see money. Sofía did not see power. Sofía only saw a sad grandmother. And something very much inside her 4-year-old heart moved. The girl from her father's strong arms stretched her chubby little finger towards the window table. "Dad, look," Sofía whispered very close to Mateo's ear. "That grandmother is alone. Why doesn't she have a family? Did Santa Claus forget about her?" Mateo turned his head discreetly and felt a cold run down his back. He recognized her instantly. Doña Elena, the same one who appeared in the economic news. The woman who made bankers and politicians tremble with just one signature. "Shh, my dear, don't point," he whispered to her, caressing her cheek. "That lady is very important. She must be waiting for someone. Let's go to our table, yes? Today is your magical night, princess." They sat them on a modest table, almost hidden, close to the wall. But from there, you could perfectly see the lonely table next to the glass. Mateo ordered the children's menu for Sofía, macaroni with a lot of cheese. And the simplest and cheapest dish on the menu for him, while he made mental calculations to cover the tip. He tried to entertain the girl by telling her stories about flying reindeer and naughty elves. But Sofía's little eyes kept coming back to the grandmother by the window. For a 4-year-old girl, there are no social classes, no hierarchies, no glass and gold barriers. There's only what you feel. And she felt that something was very wrong. On the happiest night of the year, there was someone sad. That couldn't stay that way. Suddenly, in the middle of one of her stories, Sofía interrupted. "Can we invite you to sit with us, Dad?" Mateo almost spat out the water he was drinking. "No, my love," he replied softly but firmly. "She is fine like this. Sometimes adults want to be alone. We can't bother her." But before the little girl accepts that adult explanation, let's take a break. Friends of fascinating roots. The innocence of children has a very special way of seeing what we have learned to ignore. Loneliness at Christmas does not respect bank accounts or prestigious addresses. It can hurt just as much with millions in the bank as with empty hands. I would like to take this moment to ask you something. Go down to the comments right now and tell me, from what city or country are you listening to this story? And one more important question. Have you ever invited someone who was alone to share their table at Christmas? Your answers are the heart of this channel. They help me know that these stories land, that they touch something. If you like stories that excite, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell. Let's go back to the restaurant, because Sofía is not one of those who accepts a no when it comes to making someone smile. Dinner followed its course, but on Mateo's table there was a tension that could be cut with a knife. Sofía barely touched her macaroni, with her eyes fixed on the old woman who continued to crumble the same piece of bread without taking anything to her mouth. And then what had to happen, happened. Mateo turned around just a second to ask the waiter for more napkins. and when he turned around, the chair next to him was empty. Sofía whispered with her heart in her throat. She got up with a jump, looking between the tables, and there she was, step by step, with her short legs and her moon dress, crossing the entire living room as if it were the most normal path in the world. She dodged waiters with trays, dodged the legs of elegant gentlemen, straight to Mrs. Elena's table. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Heads turned, whispers. Someone stopped chewing. Everyone saw how the youngest girl in the place approached the most powerful and intimidating woman. Mateo ran behind, scared to death, already imagining the scene. The angry millionaire, the manager shouting at them. The magical night turned into total humiliation. Sofía reached the edge of the table, put her 2 little hands on the impeccable white tablecloth, and raised her face. "Hi," she said with that sweet voice that melts hearts. Mrs. Elena, who had not left her own gray world for years, lowered her gaze slowly and found 2 huge, bright eyes, full of clean curiosity and a compassion that did not ask for anything in return. "What are you doing here, little one?" asked Elena with a hoarse voice, as if she had not used it for a long time. "Are you lost?" Sofía nodded, making her laugh. "No, I just wanted to know, why are you eating bread all alone? My dad says Santa won't come if you are sad. Do you want some of my macaroni? It has lots of cheese." It was an offer so simple, so out of place in the midst of so much luxury, that something inside Elena's chest broke. A fine crack, almost imperceptible in the armor of ice she had built for a decade. Before she could answer, Mateo arrived panting, his face red with shame and fear. "Sofía, please," he said, taking her gently by the little arm. "I told you not to bother her." Then he looked at the old woman and bowed in a nervous reverence. "Ma'am, I apologize 1,000 times. My daughter is very young. She doesn't understand. We didn't mean to interrupt your dinner. We are going to our table right now. Forgive us, please." He expected the worst. An icy stare, a cutting phrase, a signal to the manager to have them thrown out. But when he looked up, he ran out of air. Doña Elena was not upset. Her eyes, which until a few minutes ago seemed dry and dead, now shone with tears that struggled not to fall. She raised a hand full of rings, not to push them away, but to stop Mateo. "Don't take her away, please," she whispered with a trembling voice. "It's been 10 years since anyone invited me to eat macaroni." Mateo froze. His first impulse was to refuse out of respect, out of fear of bothering. But then he really looked at Doña Elena and saw something that wasn't words. It was a silent plea, that of someone who is drowning in their own loneliness, and for the first time in a long time sees an outstretched hand. "If it's not too much trouble, ma'am," he said humbly, "it would be an honor." At that precise moment, Ricardo appeared, the head waiter with a face of alarm and a servile tone. "Doña Elena, these people are bothering you. I can call security right now." The old woman looked up, and when she spoke, her voice had the edge of yesteryear, that edge that made entire boardrooms tremble. "Ricardo, bring 2 more chairs and the full menu. These are my guests of honor, and if you look at them like that again, it will be your last night in this restaurant." The order was carried out in seconds. In the blink of an eye, Mateo and Sofía were sitting at the most exclusive table in the Grand Salon, right in front of the large window from which the entire city could be seen dressed in lights and snow. And for the first time in many years, the empty chair was no longer empty. The difference between those two worlds was like a bottomless abyss. But that night, at that table, the abyss began to fill little by little. Mateo felt like a total intruder. Every time he moved his hands, he feared brushing against a crystal glass so fine it seemed made of air. His calloused mechanic's fingers contrasted with the perfect white tablecloth. But Sofía was in her element. She looked at Elena with wide eyes, as if the old woman had stepped straight out of one of her illustrated storybooks. "Are you a queen?" the girl asked, with that naturalness that only small children have, pointing to the rings shining on Elena's fingers. The old woman let out a soft laugh, almost surprised to hear herself. It was a sound that hadn't come out of her throat for years. "No, little one, I'm not a queen," she replied tenderly. "I'm just a grandmother who has many things, but no one to share them with, until tonight. Tell me, do you like stories?" While Sofía began to tell her excitedly about her favorite princesses, with words that got tangled from emotion, Elena turned her gaze to Mateo. She saw the exhaustion engraved in his eyes, the shirt ironed with care but already somewhat worn, the hands that spoke of honest work. What brings a father and his daughter to such an expensive place on Christmas Eve? She asked, with sincere curiosity, without a trace of judgment. Mateo stroked Sofía's hair before speaking. His voice came out hoarse, as if he struggled to release the words. "I made a promise to my wife, Mariana, before she left, 6 months ago. She always dreamed of coming here. She said this was the palace of Christmas." He paused, swallowing hard. "I worked double shifts at the shop, saved every peso I could, just so Sofía could live that dream for both of them, so she could feel that her mom was here, looking at her through her eyes." He lowered his gaze for a moment. "I know I don't fit in here, ma'am, but for my daughter, I would enter heaven itself if necessary." Those words fell on Elena like a giant wave. She knew the language of grief very well. She had spoken it alone for decades. But seeing that immense love, so pure, in a man who had so little materially, something inside her was stirred to the depths. "Don't say you don't fit in, Mateo," she said with a trembling voice, wiping a tear that escaped her. "Money pays for dinner, but it doesn't buy dignity or heart. You have more wealth in that promise than almost everyone in this room." She looked down at her plate, which was still empty. 20 years ago, I lost my son and my grandson, an accident. Since then, my fortune only served to build walls around me. I thought money would protect me from pain, but it only locked me in more. Today, you and Sofía have torn down those walls with a simple plate of imaginary macaroni. Determined to break the spell of sadness, Elena raised her hand with authority. "Ricardo," she called with a firm voice. The waiter appeared instantly. "Take this bread away. Bring the full Christmas tasting menu. Turkey, lobster, the biggest desserts you have, and sparkling grape juice for the girl, and a bottle of your best red wine for the gentleman and me." Ricardo nodded, although his eyes continued to cast looks of disapproval towards Mateo. In minutes, the table was transformed into a dream banquet. Every new dish that arrived under its silver dome made Sofía clap with excitement. Mateo tried to protest the expense, but Elena put her hand on his, soft but determined. No, Mateo, let me do this. It's not charity, it's selfishness. I need to see someone enjoy life, to remember what it feels like. The dinner turned into a small and beautiful party. Sofía tried unknown bites and made funny faces that drew laughter from Elena and smiles full of pride from Mateo. For the first time in a long time, Doña Elena was not the lonely rich woman from the penthouse. She was simply Elena. She told the girls stories of elephants in the African savannah, of ancient castles in Scotland, of markets full of colors in Morocco. Sofía listened with her mouth open, forgetting even to eat. Mateo watched in silence, his heart full of gratitude. He watched how the old woman's loneliness dissolved like a fog in the sun, and how his own wound calmed a little wrapped in that unexpected human warmth. In the middle of a restaurant full of strangers, 3 wounded souls were weaving, without realizing it, an improvised family, perfect for that single night. Let's take a pause here, friends of fascinating roots, because this scene reminds us of something very simple and very profound. The best Christmas gift is not bought in any store. It is given with the heart. It is time. It is company. Elena had millions in the bank and was deeply poor in affection, until Sofía and Mateo arrived. Now I want to ask you something very personal. Have you ever felt alone on an important date, even if you were surrounded by people? Or have you been the ones who invited someone who seemed to need company? Go to the comments and tell us your story with the hashtag #SharedChristmas. Your experiences inspire us all. And if this story is touching your heart, like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's go back to the table, because the night still holds surprises, and not everyone likes this unexpected union. While they enjoyed dessert, a chocolate volcano that made Sofía sigh, the magic of the table began to wobble. At the next table, a young and very ostentatious couple had been watching everything with growing annoyance. The man, in a suit that shone too much and speaking loudly on the phone, hung up abruptly and called Ricardo by snapping his fingers. When the waiter approached, the man pointed at Mateo without any disguise. "Hey, boss, we come here for the exclusivity, for the atmosphere. It is very unpleasant to have to dine next to people like that." The girl makes noise, and the man, you can tell he doesn't even know how to use the silverware. He spoke loud enough for everyone at several tables to hear. "Can't you move them to the kitchen or something? They are ruining our evening." Mateo tensed instantly. He lowered his head, feeling how the shame burned his face in front of his daughter and Elena. Ricardo, nervous and always looking out for the customers who left the best tips, began to stutter an apology to the couple and turned toward Elena's table, ready to suggest a change of place or ask them to lower their voices, but he didn't get to open his mouth. Doña Elena stood up, slowly, imposing, with a dignity that seemed to grow with every inch she rose. The entire restaurant fell silent. "Excuse me, young man," she said with a voice cold and sharp as the edge of a diamond, looking directly at the complaining man. "You speak of exclusivity and class, but you have just demonstrated that you lack the most basic education. This man, whom you despise, has proven to be a devoted father and a gentleman, something that you clearly are not. If the presence of my guests bothers you, I suggest you leave. Your table's bill is on me, as long as you get out right now." The man was left open-mouthed, red with anger and shame at being publicly reprimanded by the matriarch of the city. His companion tugged at his sleeve, whispering for him to shut up. As she recognized who Doña Elena was, without saying another word, the couple got up, gathered their coats, and left the restaurant under the reproving gaze of the other diners, who, inspired by Elena, began to murmur against them. Elena sat back down, breathing heavily, but with a triumphant smile. Mateo looked at her with astonishment and admiration. "Ma'am, you didn't have to do that," he said. "I don't want to cause you problems." Elena took his hand firmly. "Mateo, you don't cause problems. You are the solution to my biggest problem, oblivion. Besides, nobody insults my family, and tonight, you are my family." After the incident with the rude couple, the atmosphere at the table became even warmer and more intimate, as if Elena's act of defense had sealed an unbreakable pact between them. Sofía, oblivious to the social attention but happy to see her grandma smile, finished her dessert with her face stained with chocolate, an image that Elena observed with absolute devotion. For the first time in decades, the old woman felt no rush to go to her empty mansion. She wished that night would freeze in time. However, the restaurant clock marked close to midnight, and the violins began to play the last notes of Silent Night. The restaurant was emptying little by little, leaving behind the echo of laughter and the clinking of glasses. The inevitable moment of farewell had arrived, a moment that Mateo feared because it meant returning to his reality of struggle and scarcity. Ricardo approached with the check, but before he could leave it on the table, Elena stopped him with a stern look. "Don't even think about it, Ricardo," she said. "Everything is on me, including the generous tip I will give you, only if you smile when saying goodbye to my guests." Mateo tried to protest one more time, taking out his worn wallet. "Doña Elena, please, I saved for this. It is my pride to be able to pay for my daughter's dinner." Elena gently shook her head and closed Mateo's hand over his wallet. "Keep that money, son. Use it to buy a new coat for Sofía or for something you truly need. My gift to you is the dinner. Your gift to me has been your company. Believe me, I come out winning in this deal." Mateo, with moist eyes, nodded, accepting the generosity not as charity, but as a gesture of love. They left the restaurant into the winter night. The cold wind hit their faces, but the warmth of the evening still protected them. On the sidewalk, under the snow that was falling softly, a luxurious black car waited with the engine running. Elena's chauffeur, a burly and kind man named Sebastian, opened the back door upon seeing his boss come out. However, Elena did not get in immediately. She turned to Mateo, who was holding a sleeping Sofía in his arms, wrapped in his own jacket to protect her from the cold. "How will you get home, Mateo?" she asked with concern. Mateo looked toward the bus stop on the other side of the street. "We'll take the night bus, ma'am. It drops us a few blocks from the workshop where we live. Don't worry, we are used to it." The mention of the workshop where we live made Elena frown. "You live in a mechanic's workshop?" she inquired with a mixture of surprise and pain. Mateo lowered his gaze, ashamed but honest. "Yes, after Mariana's hospital bills, I had to sell our house. The owner of the shop lets me set up a small room in the back in exchange for watching the place at night. It's not much, and sometimes it gets cold, but we have a roof. Mateo's reality hit Elena like a sledgehammer. While she lived in a mansion with 10 empty rooms and central heating, this father and his daughter slept amidst the smell of gasoline and tools. And yet, he had spent his savings to give his girl a night of fantasy. The injustice of life seemed unbearable to her in that instant. Absolutely not, decreed Elena, hitting the ground with her cane. I will not allow Sofía to sleep in a workshop on Christmas Eve, and much less wait for a bus in the middle of the snowfall. She turned to her chauffeur. Sebastian, open the trunk if they have anything to carry, or just open the door. We are going to take them home. Mateo opened his eyes with alarm. No, Doña Elena, it's too much. The workshop is on the other side of the city, in an area that, well, is not appropriate for a car like this. We don't want to bother you anymore. Elena looked at him with that authoritarian tenderness that was already starting to feel familiar to Mateo. Mateo, you should know by now that I don't take no for an answer. Get in the car. Besides, I want to see where my new adopted granddaughter lives. The trip in the luxury car was silent but comfortable. Sofía continued sleeping peacefully on the leather seat, unaware that she was traveling in a vehicle that cost more than the entire neighborhood they were heading to. Mateo watched through the window as the urban landscape changed from the bright lights of downtown to the dark and potholed streets of the industrial outskirts. He felt a mixture of gratitude and shame. He didn't want Elena to see the precariousness in which he lived. He feared that the magic of the night would break upon colliding with his harsh reality. But Elena didn't look at the landscape with disgust. She looked at Mateo and Sofía with growing determination in her eyes. Her businesswoman mind was working at full speed, not calculating profits, but planning an intervention. Before arriving at the destination and discovering what radical decision Elena will take, let's take our last pause in this Christmas story. Friends of fascinating routes, sometimes help comes from where we least expect it, but it requires humility to accept it. Mateo is a proud and hard-working man, and accepting help is difficult for him. But Elena is determined to change his destiny. I want to ask you, do you believe that pride should be set aside when it comes to the well-being of children? Comment below the word hope if you believe that Mateo deserves a miracle this Christmas. And if this story has touched your heart, share the video. Maybe it will inspire someone to make another person's miracle. Let's go back to the car because they are about to arrive at the workshop, and this family's life is going to take a 180-degree turn. The car stopped in front of an old mechanic's workshop with a faded sign and a rusty metal shutter. The area was deserted and dark, only illuminated by the Rolls-Royce's headlights. It's here, whispered Mateo, feeling the weight of poverty on his shoulders. Thank you for bringing us, Doña Elena. It has been the best night of our lives. Mateo tried to wake Sofía, but Elena stopped him. Let her be. Sebastian will help you carry her inside. The chauffeur and Mateo got out, and Elena, ignoring the cold and the uneven ground, got out too. She wanted to see with her own eyes where they lived. Upon entering through the small side door, the smell of oil and dampness hit her. She saw the small cot in a corner of the workshop office, a small electric heater, and an improvised Christmas tree made of oil cans painted green. Elena scanned the small space. It was clean and tidy, full of love, but it was undeniably an inadequate place to raise a child. Elena saw a photo of Mariana, the deceased wife, with a lit candle in front of it. Elena felt her heart break into 1,000 pieces. She turned to Mateo, who had just laid Sofía on the precarious cot and was covering her with blankets. "Mateo," said Elena with a firm voice, although her eyes were full of tears. "You are a good man. You have done the impossible with the little you have, but this ends today. I cannot return your wife to you, but I can make sure that you and Sofía never again suffer cold or want." Mateo looked at her confused. "What do you mean, ma'am?" Elena took a business card out of her purse and wrote something on the back with a golden pen. "I have an apartment building downtown near the best schools. The manager's apartment has been empty for months. It's spacious. It has 2 bedrooms, heating, and a beautiful view. I want you to be the new manager of that building. The salary is triple what you earn here, and the apartment comes included in the contract, rent-free." Mateo was left breathless, staggering as if he had received a physical blow. "But I am a mechanic. I know nothing about managing buildings, and I cannot accept something like that. It is too much." Mateo looked at the golden card in his hand as if it were an alien object. The offer was too generous, almost unreal, and his male pride, the one that had allowed him to survive without asking for handouts, rebelled. "Doña Elena," he began with a broken voice, "you don't know me. I am good at fixing engines, getting stained with grease, not managing luxury properties. I don't have suits. I don't know how to talk to rich people. I am going to fail you, and I cannot accept charity just because you pitied us at dinner." Elena smiled a wise smile that knew human nature well. "It is not charity, Mateo. It is an investment. A building doesn't need someone in a suit. It needs someone who knows how a boiler works, who knows how to fix a pipe, and above all, who treats tenants with respect. You have those skills, and as for the clothes, that can be bought. Character, on the other hand, is not sold in any store." Elena took a step closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear her in the silence of the workshop. "Besides, Mateo, I'm going to confess something to you. My son, the one I lost years ago, had your same eyes and that same stubbornness of wanting to do everything alone. He never let me help him, and he left too soon. Don't make the same mistake. Don't do it for you, do it for Sofía. She deserves to grow up in a place where she doesn't have to sleep with 3 blankets so as not to freeze. Are you going to deny her that opportunity for your pride?" The mention of her son and the reference to Sofía completely disarmed Mateo. He looked at his little girl sleeping on the precarious cot and knew that Elena was right. He swallowed hard, nodded slowly, and extended his hand, dirty with grease and work, to the millionaire. "I accept, ma'am, and I swear to you by Mariana's memory that I will be the best manager you have ever had." That same early morning, Mateo and Sofía's life changed forever. There was no time for long farewells to the workshop. Elena insisted they not spend another minute there. They gathered their few belongings, a suitcase with worn clothes, Sofía's favorite toy, and the framed portrait of Mariana, which Mateo wrapped with extreme care Upon closing the metal shutter of the workshop for the last time, Mateo felt a mixture of nostalgia and relief. He was leaving behind years of struggle, cold, and loneliness, years in which every day was a battle for survival. They got back into the Rolls-Royce, but this time the trip was not a visit. It was a move toward a new life. Sofía woke up briefly during the journey, looked at the city lights, and murmured, "We're at the castle already, Daddy." Mateo kissed her forehead and whispered, "Yes, my love. We're almost there." The building, in her residencias, La Aurora, was an imposing tower of glass and stone in the heart of the residential district. When Sebastian, the chauffeur, parked in front of the entrance, Mateo felt small before the magnitude of his new responsibility. However, Elena guided him with confidence. They went up in the elevator to the second floor, where the manager's apartment was. Upon opening the door, the warmth of the central heating wrapped around them like a welcoming hug. The place was fully furnished with quality furniture, a modern kitchen, and most importantly, 2 bedrooms ready. Mateo entered timidly, touching the walls as if he feared they were a mirage. He carried Sofía to her new room, which had a real bed with soft sheets and a window overlooking the park. Upon laying her down, the girl sighed deeply, comfortable and safe for the first time in her life. Mateo could barely sleep that night, overwhelmed by gratitude and adrenaline. He got up at dawn on Christmas Day and found himself in a kitchen where the refrigerator, which Elena had ordered, filled that same night with Sebastian's help, was packed with food. He prepared coffee and sat in front of the large window, watching the sun rise over the snowy city. It wasn't a dream. He was really there. At 9 in the morning, the doorbell rang. It was Doña Elena, but she didn't come alone. Behind her, Sebastian carried a mountain of gifts wrapped in shiny paper. "Merry Christmas, family," exclaimed Elena with an energy that seemed to have taken 20 years off her. Sofía ran out of her room in pajamas, screaming with excitement upon seeing the giant Christmas tree they had installed in the living room while she slept. The magic of Christmas had arrived to stay. The following months proved that Elena's intuition had been perfect. Mateo turned out to be not only a competent manager, but an exceptional one. His experience as a mechanic allowed him to solve maintenance problems in minutes, saving the building thousands of dollars, and his kind and humble manner won the hearts of all the tenants, accustomed to distant and bureaucratic managers. Mateo worked tirelessly, dressing neatly now, but keeping his hands ready for hard work. Sofía was enrolled in the best school in the area, paid for by Elena, and flourished academically. But the most beautiful thing was the relationship that was forged between the 3 of them. Elena dined with them 3 times a week. She was no longer the distant owner. She was Grandma Elena, the matriarch of a family that destiny had united with invisible threads of need and love. 5 years passed. Sofía was now 9 years old and was a brilliant and happy girl. Mateo had taken night courses in real estate management and now managed not only that building, but 3 more from Elena's portfolio. However, relentless time began to take its toll on Doña Elena. Her health deteriorated rapidly. She could no longer visit the restaurant or walk in the park, but unlike previous years, where she would have faced illness alone in her mansion, surrounded by paid nurses, now she had Mateo and Sofía. They moved temporarily to the mansion to care for her. Mateo read the newspapers to her in the morning, and Sofía combed her hair and told her about her day at school. Elena was never alone for a single minute. She was surrounded by the genuine love she'd sown that Christmas Eve. One winter afternoon, very close to another Christmas, Elena called Mateo to her side. She was weak, bedridden in her canopy bed, but her eyes retained that intelligent shine. "Mateo," she whispered, taking his hand, "I want to thank you." Mateo shook his head, with tears in his eyes. "No, Elena, I am the one who owes you my life. You saved us." Elena smiled weakly. "You gave me a roof and food when we had nothing." "No, son. You gave me a reason to live when I only expected to die. You gave me a family. That plate of macaroni we shared was the best medicine I took in my life. Promise me you will take care of Sofía and that you will never let money change your heart. Money is a tool, not a master." Mateo kissed her hand, promising solemnly. That night, Doña Elena passed away peacefully while sleeping, knowing she was loved. Doña Elena's funeral was a massive event, but not only business partners and politicians attended. The church was full of tenants from the buildings, employees from the restaurant, and in the front row, crying inconsolably, were Mateo and Sofía. Days later, the reading of the will proceeded. The lawyers, serious men in dark suits, summoned Mateo to the main office. Mateo expected perhaps she left him the apartment where they lived or a small fund for Sofía's studies. He didn't expect anything more, for Elena's love had been sufficient reward. However, when the lead lawyer read the last will of Elena Valderrama, Mateo felt the ground open beneath his feet. "To my only son of the heart, Mateo, I bequeath the totality of my shares in the Valderrama Real Estate Group, as well as all my properties and liquid assets, with the condition that 20% of the annual profits be allocated to the creation of the Mariana and Elena Foundation, dedicated to providing dignified housing to single parents in street situations." The lawyer looked at Mateo over his glasses. "Mr. Mateo, you are now one of the richest men in the city." Mateo didn't scream or jump for joy. He covered his face with his hands and cried in silence. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the trust Elena had placed in him, she hadn't left him just money. She had left him a mission, a way to continue the chain of favors that had begun with a simple gesture of kindness in a restaurant. 10 years after that first Christmas Eve, the restaurant El Gran Salon was once again decorated for Christmas. At the best table, next to the large window, sat an elegant man of 50 and a young girl of 14. They were Mateo and Sofía. Despite being the de facto owners of half the urban horizon, they remained simple in their manner. That night, however, they were not alone. They had kept a sacred tradition. Every Christmas Eve they reserved the table, but not for themselves alone. Mateo got up and walked toward a table in the corner where an old man was eating just a soup with a sad look. "Sir," said Mateo gently, "my daughter and I were wondering if you would like to join us for dinner. We have a lot of food, and we hate eating alone on Christmas." The old man looked up, surprised and distrustful, just as Elena had done years ago. "Why would you do that for an old stranger?" asked Sofía, now a teenager with the same sweet smile of her childhood as she approached. "Because a long time ago someone did the same for us and taught us that no one should spend Christmas alone." The old man, with eyes full of tears, accepted. That night, the window table filled again with laughter, stories, and human warmth. Mateo looked toward the night sky through the glass, and for a moment he seemed to see the reflection of Doña Elena and his wife Mariana smiling among the stars. He had kept his promise. He had honored the legacy. Before closing this incredible story, let's take our last pause. Friends of fascinating routes, the story of Mateo and Elena shows us that a small act of kindness can trigger a tsunami of blessings. Never underestimate the power of an invitation, a smile, or sharing bread. I want to ask you that if this story has made you shed a tear or feel hope, write in the comments, love multiplies, and please share this video. Maybe someone who feels alone today will see it and regain faith in humanity. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that feed the soul. Now let's go with the final words of this magical night. The Mariana and Elena Foundation grew to become the most important charity organization in the country. Hundreds of families, single fathers and mothers, living in their cars or in workshops like Mateo, received dignified apartments and job opportunities. Mateo never forgot where he came from. He visited the construction sites, talked to the people, and always carried candies in his pockets for the children, just as Elena did with Sofía. He didn't become a distant millionaire, but a leader who served. Sofía, inspired by her father and her grandmother, studied social work to dedicate her life to helping others, ensuring that the cycle of kindness never broke. Mateo often returned to the old mechanic's workshop, which was now closed. He didn't go with sadness, but with gratitude. He stood in front of the rusty shutter and remembered the night the Rolls-Royce appeared like a magical carriage. He understood that true wealth was not in the bank account he inherited, but in the ability to transform pain into love. Elena had been alone with her millions and was poor. He had been broke with his daughter and had hope. By uniting, both found true prosperity. Life had taught them that hands that give will never be empty, and that the heart that loves will never be alone. In an interview for a major magazine, they asked Mateo what had been the best deal of his life, expecting him to talk about some real estate acquisition. Mateo smiled, took out an old and wrinkled photo of that first Christmas dinner, and said, "My best investment was a plate of macaroni and cheese that my daughter shared with a stranger. That plate gave me a mother, a future, and a purpose. Everything else, the money, the buildings, is just decoration. What is essential is the family one chooses." And so, every Christmas, the legend of the millionaire and the mechanic is told in the city like a modern tale. It reminds us that no matter how dark the night or how cold the winter, there's always a light waiting to be lit by a gesture of compassion. It teaches us to look around, to see the invisible, the lonely, the sad, and to have the courage to invite them to our table, because in the end, we are all travelers looking for a little warmth in this world, and sometimes that warmth is only found in the outstretched hand of a stranger. Sofía's life continued the legacy with its own strength. Upon turning 25, she assumed the direction of the foundation. In her office, she didn't have degrees hanging on the wall, but her father's old mechanic's apron and Doña Elena's cane, crossed like a coat of arms. They were her daily reminders that hard work and the elegance of the soul are the only inheritances worth the trouble. She ensured that in every building of the company, there was a community hall where no one had to spend the holidays alone, thus institutionalizing the love that saved her family. Mateo grew old with the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. When his moment to depart arrived, many years later, he left with the same peace as Elena. He was not afraid because he knew he was leaving the world much better than he found it. His story remained engraved not in stone, but in the lives of the thousands of people the foundation helped. And they say that on Christmas Eve nights, if you pass by the Grand Salon, sometimes you can feel a special warmth near the large window, as if three happy souls were eternally toasting to the miracle of having found each other. This story ends here, but your opportunity to do good is just beginning. You don't need to be a millionaire like Elena, nor have a foundation like Mateo to change the world. You just need to have Sofia's eyes to see the need and the brave heart to act. The next time you see someone alone, remember this story. Remember that a simple hello, a shared coffee, or a smile can be the beginning of a miracle. Merry Christmas to all, and may kindness always be your best gift.